In any life, we have highs and lows, light and dark, wins and losses. What happens when we encounter that moment in time when what happens next could change everything? Join us as we step into another person's inspirational moment and see how we can connect their experience to ours. This is Greg Stevens, and you're listening to A Shot of Inspiration. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of A Shot of Inspiration. I'm Greg Stevens, your host, and today we have a really good friend of mine. He is a master trainer with Crucial Learning as well. This is Justin Hale. And Justin, thanks for being on the show. Glad to have you here this week.
Great. Thanks, Greg. I'm grateful to be here and grateful for your friendship. So excited to have the conversation.
Thanks. I want to just walk people through how you came to Crucial Learning, because so many people have heard about Crucial Learning because I've been teaching Crucial Conversations for years, and that's my background. But as you came in, the rookie and new, and you've been here quite a while now, and I just loved who you were when you first came in, because you were a person that was eager to learn. You just wanted to get to know everyone. You made sure you spent time with all the master trainers. You worked with the authors. You just seemed to suck the bone marrow out of everything that Crucial Learning is. And I've seen you grow through the years so powerfully into the person you are right now. I just want to say you've been an inspiration for me in that, because I wish I would have had the knowledge and insight that you had at the age you had. So walk people through where you came from and then how you got into Crucial Learning.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate all that. It's very nice to say. Yeah, I would say that I came as a rookie. So my story starts when I was an undergrad at Brigham Young University in Utah. And I was finishing my degree in social psychology, and which I just love the psychological studies that explain why people do what they do. I was just fascinated by that, and study after study in my classes, I just thought this is so cool. But I wouldn't say that I had a grasp on what to do with any of it. I just found it really interesting, but it sparked my interest, guided my interest to start to continue to learn and go down different avenues in that space. I was walking around the bookstore on BYU's campus one day, and I saw a book titled Why We Do What We Do. There's a social scientist named Edward Deci. The book is really all about intrinsic motivation and what drives human beings. And I just, like you said, I soaked that thing up. I still have it sitting up here on my bookshelf right over there. I can see it. I highlighted it and it's all dirty. I read it and I just thought, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. And I started to work with some professors and doing research. And I saw one day a flyer on the wall that said, looking for student volunteers at an ASTD Utah conference. I had no idea what that was. It's now called ATD, but back then it was the Association of Training and Development, or something else there for the S, I forgot, but American Society of Training and Development, that's what it was. And I saw this, so I said, okay, and I called the number, and they said, yeah, we have this meeting, it's training and development companies, and we have this chapter meeting in Utah, and we need student volunteers. And I said, sure. So I went up and volunteered, and I was doing things like hosting rooms for speakers and that kind of stuff. And I discovered there was this huge industry called learning and development, training and development. There were all these companies with different booths there selling and hawking their different books and training programs. And I was just enamored by this. I walked around and talked to dozens of these different representatives of these different training companies and listened to speakers. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And one gentleman I talked to said, you should look at a company called Vital Smarts. They said, really a mover and a shaker. That was, of course, the previous name of Crucial Learning. And he said, they're really fast moving, growing, doing some really cool stuff. And so I was already in the mode of just soaking things up, reading every book I could get my hands on, looking at everybody's websites. What do you do? What does this company do? And so I went to the bookstore. I went to Borders bookstore and picked up a physical book, probably paid $30 for it, but I got this physical book of this book called Influencer that Vital Smarts at the time had just published. And it was a combination of, here's social science and here's real world application. And it literally spoke to my soul. It was like, hey, Justin, all this time you've really loved this science of why people do what they do and what drives them. And now you're seeing an illustration of how it's used, whether it's used to solve guinea worm problems in sub-Saharan Africa, or whether it's used to solve business problems that leaders are facing, or trying to get children to read more effectively, or whatever it was. I just read this book and I was just like, I need to work for this company. So I applied. I went on to Vital Smart's website and I applied for a job as an administrative assistant, which I had no qualifications for. I still had a few classes left in my undergraduate. And I applied for the job, and the hiring manager was a woman who you've interviewed, Emily Gregory, who was in a previous interview on your podcast. And she said, "Hey, I really like you, but you have no experience as an administrative assistant." I had no argument against that. I was like, "You're right." But I said, I'm just trying to get my foot in the door and do whatever I can. And I can't emphasize enough the power of good mentors in your life. Or being driven and having important skills will help you be successful in your life. But all of us are beneficiaries in one way or another of other people who have opened a door, provided a way, given the right advice in the right moments. We're all blessed by that. And she said, "Look, I have enough budget this summer to create an internship. Would you be willing to do that?" She just created one from scratch. And I said, "Yeah, I'm in the door," right? I said, "Absolutely." And so I made a decision for myself that I was just going to do everything I could to impress this woman all summer. And so anything she wanted, I was like, "I'll do it, whatever." You want some boring report created? You want me to analyze some long spreadsheet? You want me to go get people lunch? Whatever you need, I'll do it. And once again, I got really lucky because where I sat was right in the middle of all of the founders and authors and bigwigs at Vital Smarts. I was a little intern, a couple classes left in my undergrad. And so you talk about how things happen just by sheer luck because of the physical space that you're in. And that's exactly what happened to me. I just so happened to be sitting right there at the intersection of all of these world-class authors and speakers. And so I would get to know them and who are you? And through the summer, they would share advice and talk to me, and I would ask questions and ask more questions and come into their offices and say, "What does this mean?" And they always would answer and talk to me. And anyway, and so by the end of the summer, Emily said to me, "I don't have budget to hire you full time." And I thought, wait, I thought that you thought I did a good job. And she said, "I convinced the head of marketing to hire you in his department if you're interested in a full-time gig." And I said, "Yeah." And so I went over to marketing for about 6 months and I worked as a marketing specialist, entry-level position, paying entry-level salary. And I had a wonderful experience. Another mentor. I had no interest in marketing, but this gentleman, David, taught me how to be a professional, taught me what it meant to work in a company, what revenues were and profits were and marketing and how it works and how you find customers. It was just all helpful things for anybody to know that wants to work in a business. Right. And so I'm grateful for his mentorship. And then after the end of the year, Emily was able to get budget. She brought me back over to her department. And before I knew it, I was in her department full time in the training and delivery and training development part of the organization. So that was the entrance into the organization. So I really wiggled my way into it, and grateful for those that made some space for me. But really, I was driven once I understood the way the industry worked. I thought, I want to teach people.
Yeah.
I had actually had some experience before. I thought I might wanted to get into religious instruction. So I had, when I was an undergrad, within our church, we have this thing called seminary where these high schoolers go every day, and they go for an hour and they go through religious studies. And where I grew up in Georgia, it was a volunteer thing that someone within your congregation would volunteer, and it would be at 6 a.m. So 6 a.m. in high school, I used to go to the 1 hour of religious studies every day, all 4 years of high school. Hated it for a while because I was a teenager, but man, what an important thing for me to do as a teenager and what I needed as a punk teenager. But in Utah, it's actually, there's so many people that go to seminary, so many kids in our church that they have it. It's actual job. And so I thought when I was an undergrad, I thought maybe I'd want to be a seminary teacher and teach as a full-time job at one of the local high schools, like teach religious studies, Bible and other things like that. And so, because I loved the idea of teaching. And I did a couple of weeks of little tryout of that when I was an undergrad, and I hated it because I realized 75% of it was trying to discipline high schoolers. And I was like, I don't really feel like I'm talking about religion and God very much. I'm just dealing with teenagers and their behaviors. I don't think this is a fit for me. And I had a college professor who said, "Justin, if you know you want to teach, you got to decide that you want to teach. You got to decide what topics you want to teach, but then you got to decide what audience you want to teach." And he said, "For me, I learned a long time ago that I wanted to teach, but I didn't want to have to also motivate the unmotivated when I taught. I wanted to teach people that were already interested when they were coming." So that's a long way to say, when I came to Vital Smarts, I thought I want to teach. I want to be a trainer. I want to be a speaker, but I have no experience whatsoever. And Emily knew that, but I assumed that after about 5 years, I would broach the subject, but I would spend 5 years just putting in my time on Emily's team and just proving myself and learning. And after about a year, she said, look, I know you want to be a trainer one day. I said, yeah, but I'm not pushing it. I'm fine to be patient. She said, no, let's do a crucial conversations class. Let's team teach it together. And let's just see how it goes. We'll have some family and friends of the employees come. Now, in the back of her, and she told me this 10 years later, she said in the back of her mind, she thought, okay, I'm going to make this very low stakes. So if he totally screws up, it's just family and friends. It's not a client. And she said, I wanted you to see how hard it was, so it would delay your interest in doing it. And so I'm like, oh, that's interesting. It's interesting. She didn't tell me that until 10 years later. But she and I team taught this class, and I just prepared my butt off. I wanted to do a good job. And at the end of it, she laughed and she just said, okay, so I thought something would happen, but something different happened. She said, so I'd like to spend some time developing you. And she got another colleague of ours, Steve, and she said, I want Steve to coach you. And I want to see where this goes. I want you to actually start working towards becoming a trainer. I just want to see where it goes. You have no experience, but let's just see. So every time we got a request as a company, can you do this free training? And will you go to this nonprofit? They said, Justin will do it. Justin will do it. So yeah. I was just getting, talk about deliberate practice. I was getting so many repetitions with low stakes audiences, but I didn't care. I wanted to teach. Right. And I'd be sitting, my colleague Steve would get me in a training room with no audience. And he'd pull up the slides of the training program. He'd say, okay, I want you to teach this exercise, teach it through. And I'd teach it, and he'd stop and he'd say, here's some feedback, go back and do it again, and then implement my feedback. And I do it. And he said, now go back and do it again, implement my feedback, but do it in half the time, do it more efficiently and quickly. I'd do it. And then he said, okay, now go back and do it again, implement my feedback, but do it in double the time, go slower, ask some additional questions, go a little deeper. And we would do that. And then I would go into the training room by myself, and I would train and pretend there was an audience. And I just was so focused on, I thought, I'm always going to look young. I want them to just feel like I could do a good job, that I'm competent. And so I spent a lot of time doing that. And I got a chance to train early on by happenstance and started doing it and training it. And before I knew it, after 3 or 4 years, I was full-time on the road, teaching and speaking and training and certifying. And honestly, for me, living the dream. I was like, this is it. This is what I envisioned. And so anyway, that's a really, really long beginning of the story, but that's how I came into Crucial Learning. And gosh, I feel blessed. I feel lucky. I'm grateful for people that have stepped in. And also, I've just been obsessed with the topic, and that makes it easy. And a lot of people don't have that luxury, but I just love what we teach. So
yeah. I've been teaching for more than the material for about 22 years now. And I get excited every time I teach, because I get to hand out ice water in the desert. It's like everyone needs what we're talking about. Yep. But I love that. But you also, something early on, you called me up one time. I was going to be in Atlanta. I don't know if you remember this, but you
I remember it.
Had dinner with me and asked questions, and I loved our time together. And then a couple of years later, I'll never forget, I'm in Calgary, Canada, and I'm in the Marriott downtown, and I don't know that anyone's there. And all of a sudden I'm on an odd floor, and the elevator door opens up, and you're standing there and you're just coming through for the day. Do you remember that?
Oh, I remember both of those times.
Yeah. And it was just shock. We went to dinner. Then you had to go to the airport. You were just dropping something off in my hotel. Neither one of us knew each other was there. And that was one of the weirdest moments of my life, because all of a sudden on some weird floor, there you are. I was like, are you tracking me or what's going on?
No, he caught me. No, I know. What are the chances of that? I love that. I think it's funny. I do remember that Atlanta, you and I were both training public courses there at the same time, but that was such an impactful conversation for me. And actually, I think it's such a cool thing to do with people that you're getting to know, which is you could ask the general superficial questions to get to know people. But one of the things that I had said to you, and I had learned this from other people, is I'd said, okay, I want to hear your story. As far as you're willing to share it, tell me, like, I want to hear your growing up. Give me your mini autobiography. And that was so cool for me. I remember coming back and saying to some of my colleagues, I was like, have you heard Greg tell his life story? Like, it is so fascinating. And so I remember us we were actually sitting up we were eating, and I can't remember if it was it might've been South City Kitchen, but we were sitting up at the bar. I remember. And it was just, the conversation was amazingly rich. And so after that, I thought, gosh, I need to do this more. And every time I would be in the same city with a master trainer that I didn't know all that well, I would do the same thing. I would just say, hey, I want to hear your life story. A lot of people feel shy about that. Oh, like it feels self-absorbed. I'm just talking about myself. And I would say, no, I want And I would often say, hey, I had this experience with Greg that was so impactful for me. And I feel like I got to know this guy in an hour in such a deep way. I want to hear your story that you're willing to share. And I remember having conversations with our colleague, Barbara Hauser, and a handful of other people, and just hearing them tell their stories. And I also think that it also created this empathy, right? Where you get to know somebody in such a deep way and their experience, you hear their heartbreaks and their struggles, you hear how they were raised, and gosh, you never look at that person the same ever again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so we teach the idea of mastering your stories and your perceptions. And sure, there are moments when you can ask yourself poignant questions to really say, maybe this isn't true about this person. Maybe there's a different way to think about them. But gosh, I can't think of a more powerful way to think differently about someone than actually understand their whole story. And it doesn't justify when people make mistakes and things like that. But gosh, you are so much more patient, understanding, and loving with people when you hear their whole situation. So anyway, yeah, I love that. And that Calgary's, I mean, what are the chances that you open that one elevator and I'm there? And I don't know if this is true, but the number of times that I went to that hotel and I went with the intent to go work out in the gym, but I ended up getting a cookie in the lobby and not going to the gym. So I don't know if that happened when I saw you, but that happened a lot to me.
That's good. That's good. I also think it's one of the things I love since we've updated the Crucial Learning, the Crucial Conversations material on the listening skills. We have an exercise where someone talks, the other person listens. I think to understand, I think there's such a connection that's made when we're listening to understand.
Yep.
Because that's what you were doing. And you did, not only did it connect us, but it also taught you a format of how to get to know and connect with people very well. Sometimes we think we have to share that one thing, but listening can create it. And that's one of the things I love, because when we're listening, actually the person's story is creating mirroring neurons that create connection for us. And I love that, because I was teaching a class in South Texas about 4 or 5 months ago. And there's this one gentleman, he was just looked staunch the entire time. And this is toward the end of the second day. And they did this exercise where he listened, or someone listened to him, and he changed 180 degrees in that moment. I wish we would have started out with that exercise, because he was on fire after that.
Yeah. Oh, that's so true. I love Emily says this statement a lot. She says that it's not the other person telling you their concerns that builds the relationship. It's them watching you listen that builds the relationship. And I think that's really true.
I agree.
Yeah, I love the concept.
That's how you got to Crucial Learning. And folks, Justin is our guru for, I think you've pretty much spent more time with David Allen than probably anyone in Crucial Learning. And David, I was so honored I got to sit next to him when I learned when I learned getting things done. But you took over a lot of the work for getting things done, revamping it, putting into the current model that we have now. And tell us a little about that. What was there something about getting things done, or was it just one of those things that was given to you and you created a passion from that?
Yeah. So I think I've always been interested from a learning standpoint about, like I said, about social science, why people do what they do. But from a practice standpoint, in terms of just daily habits, and I wouldn't say that these things were really even apparent to me. It was just the way I was. I like to wake up and make a plan and be really organized and have a to-do list. So this idea of being organized and being deliberate about how I spend my time has always been a practice of mine. But I wouldn't say that it's been like a big interest, the topic. It's not like I've read 4 or 5 years ago extensively about productivity or time management, but it has been an important practice of mine, getting things done efficiently and quickly and responding quickly. And so a few years ago, when we as a company developed a relationship with David Allen, and he'd been for 30 years studying productivity and stress and how people can be more present and focused and do more of the right things rather than just feeling busy all the time and running around putting out fires. And so when I learned his methodology and his research, it really spoke to me in that way. I thought, oh my gosh, like these principles, once again, speak to my soul in terms of how I like to live, but I never really had a philosophy in the way that I went about things. I just had things I did. I don't know how I learned them, probably picked them up here and there, watched other people in my company. Oh, that's a good idea. But I think that for anyone, having a philosophy that you use to approach any way in life, whether it's a philosophy for communication or a philosophy for productivity, and a philosophy is operationalized through models, but having a way that you think, this is the way I approach things, having a philosophy I think is really helpful. So this gave me a philosophy to think about how I do stuff, how I get stuff done, how I manage my stress, how I manage all the things in my life. And that was huge. And yeah, I had a chance to learn from David Allen, his expertise, learn from him and talk and read his research and read his books and create a version of the training program, and then spend a lot of time speaking on it and teaching it and coaching people. And that was really powerful for me. So I've really come to love that idea. And what's been fun is getting dozens of emails from people saying, and because think about productivity, just doing more. That's how a lot of people perceive. I learned a productivity skill so I can do more stuff or do it faster. Sure, that's the benefit for some people. But what I've found that's really cool is I get emails from people saying things like, I was in the middle of trying to manage my team when I was pregnant with twins, and I was trying to figure out how to get it all under control and be ready before I went on maternity leave. And GTD saved me. It allowed me to be able to get everything in control. So now that I have my babies and my family, I don't have to think about work because I'm confident that I took care of it. And now I can be present and focused with my family. Or people saying, I'm able to actually have dinner with my kids every night and I'm present and focused when I'm there. Or gosh, I'm able to actually get that promotion at work because I'm better able to manage everything that I have. Or when I'm taking my kids to the park, I'm actually at the park. I'm focused and present, not thinking about those dozens of emails and tasks that I haven't finished yet. I've loved that element of this idea of getting things done, which is that getting things done isn't just about getting stuff done. It's about being appropriately engaged with your work and your life, whatever that means. However you want to be engaged with your work and life, it will help you be more engaged in that way. So yeah, it's been really fun to get a chance to learn from not just the original founders of Crucial Learning about crucial conversations and influencer, but with David Allen around productivity. And that's been my work over the last 5 years, is really designing those learning experiences, making them engaging and fun and inspirational for people.
Well, it's interesting because when I took, like I was talking about getting things done there at the corporate offices with Vital Sports at the time, I talked to David and he said, "You excited about teaching this?" And I said, "I haven't really decided if I am yet." And he said, "Why?" And I said, "I like crucial conversations and accountability influencer because, no offense, they really change people's lives and really help them in different areas. I just can't see doing an organizational talk or something like that." And he said, one thing, Greg, he said, learn what you learned today, put your system in place, and then decide if you want to teach it. And I thought, that's fair. And Justin, it took me nearly 6 months to get my system in place because I still had my taxes boxed up from 1987 in my closet. And I had so much stuff. We typically say it takes 24 to 48 hours to get your system together. Because I was such an information hoarder, it took me a lot more time. But the question people always ask, was it worth it? And the answer is absolutely yes.
Yeah.
It's worth every. And David also told me, he said, think of your future self. Think of yourself 6 months from now. You want to be able to look at your future self in the eye and say, I did this for you. And I really did that. That stuck with me because there were times when I was like, is this really going to be worth it? And it has been. And it's so funny because my place used to be a mess always. I had stacks of stuff on the floor. No one could ever understand. My brain had to hold on to so many things.
Yeah.
And as I got it done, it cleared all that out. And I used to think I was really able to be present with people. But you always have those random ideas that jump in your head. If you're on the road, you're talking to someone, oh, I need to do this when I'm home. I need to do this. All of that noise is gone now. And like you said, I can just be totally present in the moment with the people I'm with because my system's in place.
Yeah, that's so true. It really is. And I think that what's interesting about the Getting Things Done methodology, it was originally based on executives coming to David Allen saying, I need to get things under control. So I think it's interesting that your first thought is, I can't imagine standing in an organization. This is where it started. Executives coming to David saying, okay, I'm an executive of a Fortune 500 company. I'm on the board of 2 or 3 other large corporations, and I cannot handle it. I can't get under control. I'm so overwhelmed. And so he coached dozens and dozens of the busiest people. Actually, he can only even disclose a handful. He worked with many of them. They signed non-disclosure agreements because of how well known they are. But he'll even talk about how he worked with people like Howard Stern and other people that were just highly successful. And he said that a lot of times the most successful people are the people that are attracted to the getting things done methodology, because they realize where their game was at one point, and now they're so overwhelmed that they're drowning in, so to say, this sea of stuff. And now they want to take their game to the next level, and they want to surf on top of that wave rather than be buried by it.
Yeah.
And so I'm with you. I think that once people fully grasp and start applying and using a day-to-day life, these methodologies, we did a study. It was interesting. It was, when I looked at it, and a lot of people look at the data, it looks like there's some mistakes in the data, or maybe it's a typo, but we found that people who use the getting things done skills consistently are 55 times less likely to say, I start projects that don't get finished and just hang around. They're like 13 times less likely to say, I'm rarely present at home. And they're 18 times less likely to say, I'm constantly stressed by things that are hanging over my head and I'm worried about what's gonna crash, right? Those are massive differences, right? And so you think, oh, I'm gonna learn some skill and my life's gonna get a little bit better. That's true with a lot of things. But if you use these skills, not perfectly, but consistently, I'm talking about disproportionate impact on your stress, your mental presence and focus. And yet people don't think about that. They tend to just blame everything else. I hear people say that all the time. Oh, I just don't have enough time, as if it's time's fault, as if the fact that we have 24 hours, it's somehow the 24 hours fault. And I'm like, no, if you had 26 hours, you just spend it the way you spend the existing 24. Getting more time wouldn't help you. Or sometimes they blame it on the stuff. They say, oh, I just have too much stuff. It's too much stuff. And I said, it's not the stuff's fault, because guess who made those commitments? You made those commitments. And so it's not the stuff's fault. It's how you're engaging with that stuff. So I find it really helpful to know where it all came from, because I look at it and say, I'm not an executive of a Fortune 500 company. I'm not on the board of 3 or 4 other companies. I'm not as busy and overwhelmed as those people. And if they can get it together and feel a lot less stress and getting everything under control, I think I can too.
Yeah, I agree. And share a time, because I know you do have a story about when the skills really came to your aid, a huge stressor in your life and your relationship. Share with our audience that experience and how GTD actually helped you in that moment.
Yeah, the irony of the story is that we were in the process of developing the first version of Getting Things Done training by Crucial Learning. And so we were literally in the middle of shooting videos and designing slides and exercises. And at the time, my wife, Christina, and I had 2 kids. Ethan was 3 and Jackson was 2. And we were pregnant with our third. And some of your listeners might be saying, there's your problem right there, Justin. You set yourself up. You set yourself up right there. It's like, that's true. I'll take responsibility for that. But she was pregnant with our third son. And she was at about 21, 22 weeks in the pregnancy, and her water broke, which is a very, very scary thing. So that fluid inside of the womb is such an important part of helping the baby to develop the lungs. And it's just such an important part. So as her water breaks, we go into the hospital and we're having conversations with the doctor about, okay, in the next 24 hours, if she has to deliver, there's a 50% likelihood the baby's not going to make it. It was just the scariest, most intimidating, and just overwhelming conversations I never thought I would have. Conversations about, okay, if it's another week, then your baby's likely going to have brain bleeds, which would mean this for the rest of his life. It was just so scary and heartbreaking. And anyway, and so at that moment, the hospital pretty much said, look, what we would like to do is admit you to the hospital. And we want you to stay here until you deliver the baby. We want you off your feet. We want you laying here, because what we want to have happen is, 1, we want to be ready that if the baby starts coming, that we can deliver him as quick as possible and then put him into NICU and start treating him, because he's going to be so premature. And also we need to be able to have Christina here to give her medicine and treatment, whatever we can, to try to delay this pregnancy as long as possible. So here's me overnight. She gets put into the hospital. And just like that, I'm a single dad with a 3-year-old and 2-year-old who travels regularly in the middle of developing the GTD program. Really. So in that moment, I think a lot of people would say, and by the way, it wasn't just that I was developing GTD, it was that I was still fairly new to it. I'd only learned this methodology for managing your actions and your time and your stuff and your projects like 3 or 4 months before that. Now, most people learning some new skill set, when things go bad, what people tend to tell me is, oh, I loved what I learned in your class, but X happened and I just had to set it aside so I could focus on X. And I'm thinking, well, do you realize I taught you X to be able to deal with this problem? And so in that moment, it was a test of my own sort of faith and belief in the methodology and in the system. And so rather than setting aside GTD, I said to myself, the promise of GTD is to be more present and focused, to manage all of life's work. So this is the greatest case study in my own life to be able to prove if it's true. And so instead of setting it aside, I doubled down. I focused on things like every single time I was with my wife in the hospital and she asked me to take care of something or do something, guess what I didn't do? I didn't leave it in my head, hoping I would remember it. I took no mental notes. I captured everything we talked about that needed some doing, some taking care of, some attention, some action. I captured in some place that I knew that later on, when I put my kids to bed, I could sit down and look at everything I'd captured and I could make plans of what I needed to do and when I needed to do it. We talk about the linchpin of the getting things done methodology is the weekly review. Every week, sitting down for 45 minutes to an hour and just cleaning up and getting clear and making plans and looking at your long-term goals and making sure you're where you need to be and renegotiating things. And I did 2 weekly reviews a week at that time. I would do 2 45-minute a week because so much was happening. And when I would do that, it allowed me to be able to step back. And I said, okay, right when she went to the hospital, I stepped back and I said, okay, what do I need to say no to that I had previously committed to? And the cool part was, Greg, I had everything I'd already committed to in a clear inventory. It's very difficult to know what you need to say no to if you can't remember what you've said yes to. And I had a full inventory. I could go through that inventory and said, okay, here's this project I've committed to this date. And here's these tasks I've committed to at these dates. I'm going to have to renegotiate this. I'm going to have to say no to this. A lot of them were commitments to myself. I wanted to do X and do Y. I needed to delay those. Okay, I'm going to do those later on. But I had a full inventory, which allowed me not to stress about, oh my gosh, what should I do? I just stepped back and said, what are my commitments and what do I need to prioritize? So I was able to say my priorities are making sure I get my boys to see my wife every day in the hospital, making sure I was managing the home, because now I had to focus on all the responsibilities she had, I needed to start doing as well. And whether it was, making dinner and doing laundry and cleaning the house, I had to quickly hire a nanny. So that became a new project for me. Research a nanny, find someone that could come and spend 3 or 4 hours with the kids in the morning so I could work. And so doing all of those things. And so I really doubled down on my habits. And I went to my wife and said, okay, every day. She was very particular about how she wanted to do the laundry. And she's like, okay, I don't dry these types of things. And I was like, okay. And so guess what I did? I captured every bit of it. I was like, tell me step by step. Okay. You put it on this setting. Okay, great. And these colors. Okay. What do you hang? What do you dry? And I wrote it all down into the process. And when it was time to do it, I just got out the list. Here's the process. No mistakes, no memory needed. Let me just write a very simple-minded Justin. Let me just follow the process. I had great renegotiation conversation with my boss. It was Emily at the time. And I said, hey, and she was amazing. She just said, what do you need? Okay, immediately, let's take you off the road. I will find people to teach your classes and speak in your speaking engagements. And she said, you let me know when you're ready to do any of that. I will just assume you're not doing it anymore until you're ready to go back and do it. So once again, other people being able to take care of that for me. And I can honestly say, looking back on that, she was in the hospital for 50 days. Okay. Wow. 50 days. I'm not like come home visit. No, literally in the hospital for 50 days. And I took the kids to visit her every day. And then once Sam was born, he was born at 30 weeks. He was then in the NICU immediately. And he ended up being in the NICU for 86 days. Wow. So there was a whole nother set of things that needed to be taken care of. Every day we're going to visit him. And anyway, but I can honestly say, looking back on that situation, and grateful, by the way, what a blessing that things worked out the way they did, because he's healthy and he's doing great, which is wonderful. But I can honestly say that an overwhelming situation didn't overwhelm our family. And I owe so much of that to those GTD skills, that it wasn't about the situation. It wasn't about what was happening. It was about how was I going to handle it? So in that moment, I could have handled those moments very differently. I could have tried to remember stuff. I could have said, you know what? It's too much. We can't visit Christina. We'll come a couple times a week. But it allowed me to be able to put the most important stuff first. And I can honestly say that when we went to go visit Christina and the 2 boys went every day, that I was present, that I was focused, that I wasn't sitting there preoccupied with, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? What am I going to do? What about this? It allowed me having a clear understanding of what I was choosing not to do, and knowing it was sitting over here allowed me to be so focused on what I was choosing to do. Yeah. And what's interesting actually is in some of those original videos that I was in the GTD training program, nobody really knows this, but if you look in the training, I had on my wrist these little wristbands, and they were from the hospital that I was given so that I could enter the hospital each day to go visit Christina and Sam. And I had that on my wrist. And so anyway, I feel really grateful for that, because I feel like we were able to handle it and really focus on what was most important without being buried or overwhelmed or being so stressed out that I feel like we couldn't still enjoy the enjoyable moments. Because she was in the hospital, we had Jack's birthday at the hospital. I remember they allowed us to wheel her out into the courtyard, into this little area where they had these picnic tables, and we celebrated his birthday there, had the family there, right? And these are things that are most important in life. And I think that the only way that you can give true focus to what you care about is if you have the skills to be able to deal with everything else. And if you just allow everything to drive you, you're just going to feel all the time, I'm just busy, but I'm never really doing what I want to do. You're going to feel driven. And my friend Rita Clyde likes to say, GTD allows you to be the hammer, not the nail in your productivity situation. I love that metaphor. I think that's really true. And most people feel like the nail. So anyway, that was a powerful story from my life. It was a testimony to the power of getting things done.
Well, that's great. And Rita was actually on last week.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Good.
we got to hear her. But what I heard you say around all that, it really touched me just a moment ago. It allowed you to be the father and husband you wanted to be in a crisis, rather than wishing you could be something else.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, Justin, thank you for that message. Thank you, folks. Inspiring to me. I know it was to you. I want to say thank you, Justin, for being here. And folks, we'll see you next time on A Shot of Inspiration. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of A Shot of Inspiration. If you like this or any of our other episodes, make sure you rate it and share it with a friend. This is Greg Stevens, and we look forward to being with you next time. Until then, be bold, be courageous, and respectfully speak your truth.